Been a while. Hello, hello. Hi, everybody. Hi. So we are live on LinkedIn and where else have we set it to? YouTube. So we're live on LinkedIn and YouTube. It's been ages since I've done a live, and this is a long overdue conversation. So my guest today, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes.
And then we'll see where we go. We're just like having a lovely chat.
Well, my name is Myrto and I am a leadership and corporate well-being consultant. I'm the founder of One Breath Mindfulness Center, and I'm a keynote speaker as well on the subjects of mindfulness and well-being and finding balance, but also core leadership skills. And I'm really happy to be here with you, Kelly. We met, I think, a couple of years ago in a conference we were both speaking at.
It was GPMA, wasn't it, in Greece?
Exactly.
But yeah, like 18 months ago, probably. Was that last year?
Ah.
I think last June. So you were kind of taking everybody through a breathwork. Was it breathwork that you were taking people through? I think you did some breathing exercises and stuff.
Well, yeah, we talked a little bit about how the mind works and how the brain works and all how it kind of sucks us into, wanting to achieve more, and how it's, sometimes is not, our nervous system is not supporting us if we're not supporting it either. So we kind of talked about all that. And then I gave people a couple of practices that can help regulate the nervous system through mindfulness and breath work. And we kind of connected through that. And here we are a couple of years later.
We did, yeah. All that time later. And I said a moment ago, right, this has been a kind of long overdue conversation. And again, right, I think probably as part of what we want to talk about today, right, in terms of like resilience and burnout and how all of this stuff should just be like leadership fundamentals, right? These should be like leadership basics. So we have, I don't know, we've had to postpone this conversation twice. And we've had to postpone as a result of my health and stuff that's been going on for me, which again stems back to burnout, right? I now live with kind of three chronic health conditions, really, as a result of two really severe periods of burnout. And maybe I'd got a little bit too cocky this year, but I thought I'd kind of got to the point where I was managing everything as brilliantly as I possibly could do. Yeah. And then we kind of had the clocks change, and it almost seemed like as soon as the clocks changed, particularly with one of my conditions, it's just got absolutely ridiculous, right? So for me, this is a huge part of why I do what I do. I don't want anybody, firstly, to ever have to experience the burnout, but secondly, to never have to experience the health conditions that I now live with as a result of the severe amount of stress that I was putting my body through. And we were talking, weren't we, just before we went live, like you're doing some big sessions with people at the moment, and the stuff that you're talking about, right, in terms of mindfulness and resilience and well-being. I think we're both of the mind, right, that well-being is an outcome of everything that we do, right? It's not just a tick box initiative. But for you, like you were saying kind of just before we came on, that for some people, like it feels like it's the first time that they're ever having any of these sorts of conversations or kind of ever kind of going through any of that. And yeah, I think like you and I have kind of both of the mindset, right? We need to be much more proactive. We need to be putting preventative actions into place, preventative measures, well-being and or burnout, right? Both being kind of outcomes of everything that we do. It's not just a tick box that's kind of gonna get you there. So I suppose if we're talking kind of leadership and those kind of fundamentals, I suppose like why firstly do you think it is the first time that so many leaders are starting to have these conversations? Like, why has it not been part of the agenda until now?
I think it's because we thought, just like you shared before, we thought we could do it all. So it was a totally different culture that we were living in. And we thought, I think, that our capacity was limitless. And this is what I was taught, and this is how I was raised, in a sense. I started working 24 years ago in management consulting in New York, and I basically burned out after 15 years of just burning the candle at both ends. And I thought that I could do it, like you just mentioned, and I'm still learning that I can't. Yeah. So I think it's a matter of just realizing that there's just a limited capacity, and that when we feel better as human beings, then we can perform also better. And this is something that COVID, I think, taught us. And this is something that COVID showed us. That's why interest in well-being programs and burnout prevention programs and awareness has risen tremendously after the pandemic, because we had just seen that we cannot do it all, and we cannot do it all the time. Yeah. And then also there's, and now as we're trying and as we're training our people more and supporting our people more, we're seeing the benefit of it. So it is the cultures are starting to change. The way we see how to manage a company and be productive and effective and bring results is changing. It's not about just giving it all for as much as you can stand and then burn out and get out of the way. It's about how can we build sustainable, human-centric organizations that honor our humanness, but also, bring results, because that's what we all want. So it's changing, thank God.
Yeah, it needs to, right? It needs to.
Exactly.
And we'd mentioned, like you'd mentioned, resilience, and I've had this conversation with a really good friend of mine, actually, who kind of does a lot around resilience in all of her work. And I have definitely seen an increase in the number of like job adverts, job descriptions, all of those things, right? Where people are basically saying, we need you to be resilient, right? In order to be this, like, we want resilience. They're talking about resilience as a core skill. But when I think back to it, and when I have conversations with some of the people that are either kind of applying for the roles or going into it, resilience in so many places seems to be a word that is put in a job description, because basically what we mean is we just need you to keep on dealing with all the stuff that we're going to throw at you, and you just need to be able to put up with it, right? So when lots of organizations, when lots of leaders, when recruiting managers are talking about resilience, I think they just mean you just got to be able to deal with all the crap, right? You've got to be able to deal with everything that comes to you. But from your perspective, when you're talking about resilience, just kind of give us a flavor of what does that look like? Because it's not just keep dealing with all of the stuff that we're going to throw at you, is it? It needs to be more than that. And I think we need a bigger, better understanding around resilience, because certainly, again, when I see people that get to burnout, what I hear from them, well, I thought I was resilient and I've just realized that I'm not. And I'm like, actually, let's reframe this. You and I were both in the sectors that we were in, doing the roles that we were in for 15 years. We proved during those 15 years just how resilient we were in order to keep on going and dealing with all of that stuff. And so it's not about the fact that you couldn't do it, but I do think we need to almost kind of take a step back, right? And it's like, what do we mean by resilient? And how can we create the work environments where we actually allow people to be resilient in a healthy way, rather than just assuming that it means we're just going to chuck all the stuff at you and you've just got to be able to spin all of the plates.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that, because actually that's one of the times when these initiatives about cultivating well-being and supporting people with resilience trainings is kind of backfiring. So it's about, when organizations who have toxic work cultures and really, really demanding environments, in the sense that you mentioned, kind of go on and offer then these trainings, it kind of backfires, because we need a systemic approach to it. It's not just about, expecting you to do everything all at once and, the work of 4 people for the price of 1 and hang in there. It's about, do we have the systems in place? Do we have the processes in place? Is our culture aligned with what we're saying that we want, our people to feel like and be like when they work for us? So it's really, really about offering these kinds of trainings, because resilience is teachable. It's a skill that we can learn, and also coupling it with, our core culture that will support let's say the baseline and the processes and the let's say the way we do things in order to support our resilience. So 2 things. I see it as, because they're asking for resilience. Everybody's asking for resilience, right? We all want to be resilient. Such a buzzword. Yeah. And yet nobody has ever taught us how to be resilient. Nobody has ever taught us what it means to cultivate that skill. So it is about looking at the challenges, but also learning skills and strategies and practices that can help us be our best self in the middle of chaos, in the middle of these growing demands that modern life and modern work have to do. And it's the first time that we're looking at it more systematically. So that's why I'm seeing a lot of increase in trainings that have to do with reskilling and upskilling, and not just doing all the, reskilling and upskilling when it comes to business skills, but also including these kinds of skills like resilience and self-leadership, but in a practical way and in a way that everybody can put it to use from day one after the training, so that they can see the results in their life in a meaningful way. So resilience for me is not just a buzzword. It's something that we can train, and there's different practices and ways that we can approach it. There's different methods, obviously. There's not just one way, but there's many different things that we need to take into account. And you mentioned your own story. I have talked a lot about mine, and one of the most important elements to that is awareness, is self-awareness, is being aware of where our boundaries lie, is being aware of where our body is able and not able to do, is being aware of when we've had enough and there is a need to take a pause, and then being aware of the practices and the strategies that are available to us in order to replenish our energy, in order to rest our nervous system, in order to go back with renewed motivation and drive to do all these wonderful things that we need to do.
Yeah, I love all of that. And again, I think you and I are both very much of the kind of same school of thought, right? When it comes to that self-awareness, that self-understanding, that self-knowing. I, again, kind of talk about a lot in terms like the burnout equation, right? In terms of actually like toxicity minus our sense of self equals burnout. It's that loss of our sense of self, right? If we jeopardize our values, our behaviors, if we feel like we have to adjust who we are to fit into some of these toxic workplaces, right? And toxic habits and all of those things. So I suppose, again, within your work, particularly, I suppose, around some of the leadership, we will both have seen over the years, right, specific leadership frameworks and tools and tick boxes and all of this. But it's only really over the last couple of years that I've really started to see some of the leadership stuff reframed to get leaders to focus on who they are, right? To have that self-awareness, to develop that self-understanding, that self-knowing. And I think you and I both appreciate, right? I think just like from a well-being perspective, it is that sense of self, right? If I know my body and you know your body, if I know my limits and you know your limits, if I know my strengths and you know your strengths, and if I know my values and you know your values, then actually being our best of all of those things, understanding our limits, our boundaries, our limitations, from my perspective, is what allows us to create well-being, right? For ourselves, for our teams, and for everybody else. With the work that you do with the types of organizations that you work with, are you seeing more of that kind of self-awareness as being like a critical point of the work that you do with the organizations that you work with? And if not, how can we start to have some more of those conversations in the workplace?
Well, it is. I mean, self-awareness in itself is something that we know that it's it's very desirable and one of the top business skills. I would argue it's actually the most important, because this is where it all starts from. On the other hand, I don't see it yet as well developed and as embraced in terms of leadership trainings, because sometimes we feel it as somehow out there. We don't really know what it is about. And we don't really know how to actually cultivate it. It's like, okay, I wish, I know who I am. Actually, based on research, most leaders believe that they have high self-awareness, but then when they go through training or questions, then we realize that we don't. And actually that's the biggest pitfall of them all. So I think I know that I know, but I actually don't know. So it's one of my, one of the jobs that I have to do actually at the moment is creating more awareness about what self-awareness means in leadership, and actually then showing the way about how we can cultivate it. Because if we are not aware of our own patterns, if we're not aware of our own limitations, our emotions, our bodily sensations, our limits, we cannot manage others. This is where emotional intelligence stems from. Self-awareness, and then being able to lead ourselves, and then awareness of others, which creates emotional intelligence, and then we can lead others. So it's we're not there yet, I feel, but we're getting there, since we're realizing that without the self-awareness, there's no really a clear compass for each leader as to where they're going to and how can they get there. but it's a work in progress. I feel we're mostly talking about well-being in the sense of let's take ourselves now and let's put out fires now, rather than spend more energy into cultivating a deep self-awareness that is going to prevent burnout in the future, that is going to create more healthy teams, that is going to foster a more human-centric culture. So
how do you think we can start to have more of those conversations then? Because we both talk about it in different ways, right? We're both doing it from our own experience. We're both doing it with the specific clients that we work with. But how can we start to how can that be the starting point for conversation? So you said that at the moment we're kind of firefighting, right? Let's talk about short-term well-being, put out those fires, and then we can start to have a different conversation. But if we genuinely want to be more preventative, and this is my driver, right? My absolute driver. If we could burnout prevention, if I could be preventing it through talking about some of this stuff and doing some of this stuff in with people now, right? Because again, you said most leaders think that we kind of think we've got this self-awareness and emotional intelligence. I will still speak to so many no, burnout's never going to happen to me. It's never going to get to me. I'm fine. I know what I'm doing. Everything's okay. And then 2 years later, I'll get people in my own, but even though I've been following you for 5 years, I didn't think it would happen to me. And now I'm at the point of burnout. I think sometimes we kind of need to go through it. I think that's what I've kind of realized, right? Sometimes we need to go through it to make those changes. But I would still love us to get to the point of knowing deeply who we are and knowing that that is the starting point for stopping burnout totally.
Yeah.
How can we, how do we have meaningful conversations from that perspective that says, right, if you can really understand who you are at your core, whatever your version of that is, but how do we really start to get that message out there in a way that gets all of this stuff preventative, right? Because ideally, if I didn't need to be doing burnout anymore, I'm teaching yoga on a mountaintop in Ibiza or something, and fully doing all of the breath work and empowerment stuff that I absolutely love doing. And what do we do?
Well, I think it's about having conversations like the ones that we are having and raising awareness, because I think and I know that typically human beings would learn through pain, and it's the greatest teacher of all. But you and I both know that the pain of burnout has a tremendous cost. I'm still recovering from my burnout, and that was 14 years ago, and I'm still not up there. I'm inherited I'm still basically, I'm deaf on the one side. I have an autoimmune disease. I'm still struggling with a lot of musculoskeletal pains that I'm dealing with ever since that time. So we all know that it's much more difficult to recover from burnout than to spend time, effort, energy, and money into preventing it. So I think raising awareness through these conversations is one step. And then is actually finding some leaders, especially when it comes to the HR field or, top leaders that are really open to understanding what the benefits are. And typically these are the ones that have also found some struggle in their own lives. And in the way they see that the benefit comes from being more focused on prevention rather than, solving the problem once it arises. And we have a lot of great studies also that have come up lately. And I love that a study from Oxford University Wellbeing Research Center that is the first such large scale that I actually presented recently for a big consultancy. And how they love numbers, and how we love charts when it has to do with proving something and convince me, why should I do it? And I love this because now we have more research on it. And actually, this is a huge study that was done that compared basically the well-being index, workplace well-being index, with thousands and thousands of companies that are on the Indeed.com platform, which is the largest job search platform on the planet, obviously. It has, it's both in the US and also in Europe. And what they found is when they correlated that well-being index, workplace well-being index, with the performance of the company, it was an absolute positive correlation. So the more well-being, the higher the well-being score of the company, that the higher the firm value, the higher the return on assets, and the higher the return on profits. And then they did an amazing simulation where they mapped the performance of the top 100 companies of the NASDAQ and the S&P 500 in terms of their score, and they mapped it to the NASDAQ 100 and S&P 500 returns. And these companies outperformed consistently. So basically, that's another way, say, I can create a portfolio of investing in those companies that have the highest well-being scores, and I can guarantee you that these companies are going to have outperformed the indices because their people are happier, because their people are healthier, because they feel that they're cared for, not only in on paper, but in a real way that has to do with, it has to do with four, let's say, measures: job satisfaction, happiness at work, purpose, of course, which has to do with meaning, and then being stress-free, or having the tools to manage everyday workplace stress. So I think it's a combination. And the more we speak about these things and the more research we have it, and then the more evidence-based information we have, the more companies are going to be convinced to invest in prevention rather than helping people recover with a greater cost afterwards.
And how important is it, do you think, that we talk about it, like well-being, right? The outcomes of well-being. How important do you think it is that we talk about that from performance measures or profitability? Because I know we both speak to a lot of HR professionals within our role, right? That's a lot of our audience. I, spent a very long time in my career within HR, so still a lot of my kind of audience and community are in that space. But a lot of the time, HR can't necessarily, not because they don't want to or because they're not strategic enough or any of those things, but sometimes when we're talking about people initiatives, right, HR will sometimes talk about these things, well-being struggles, the happiness, the health of individuals, based on the conversations that they're having, right? How many people are going into their office, knocking on their door, or sending them emails to say, I'm really struggling and this is what I need. And so sometimes the quantifiable statistics, data, information isn't always there, right? But they're saying, we've had 50 people come and speak to us today that are all really struggling. We need to do something about it. And yet that we still see so many leaders, so many organizations that want to know, like, that exact return on investment, right? For every £1 that we spend, what are we going to be getting back? What's the benefit of that? And when it comes to the well-being of people, we can't always talk in terms of numbers, right? The research that you've mentioned there from Oxford University is great and will be a help. But do you think that needs to be with the types of organizations that you're working with, do you think that will continue to be like the inroad, right? Do we need to keep talking about well-being in terms of statistics and data and profitability and performance? Is that how we get in to those organizations and really start to make a difference? Or would different organizations that focus more on the people and people first organizations, do they care so much about the data?
Well, I think it's both, because in the end, it is an investment. So if you have to decide about where to allocate that budget, you need to decide where to put it and where it's going to bring the most impact, whatever that might be, quantifiable or not, soft or qualitative or quantitative. So that's one way. And then the other way is actually going proactively. So the companies, my clients, because I work with large multinational companies and thousands of people, what I see is the ones that are more effective with their well-being programs and the leadership programs that also combine that part of resilience and well-being are the ones that are proactive and actually do not wait for people to knock on their doors, but actually knock on their doors and ask for their feedback. So you typically find that in whether internal pulse surveys that you might ask people, or it might come up as sort of a result from an employee satisfaction study, or a lot of my clients might see it as in poor results when it comes to great workplaces to be, which is like a metric, great workplace here, metrics of that kind. So if you see that there's a gap there, or if you see that there's a drop, or if you get some feedback from your entire organization that we're missing out on something, then it's a big incentive to start offering. And if you don't have these researches, if companies don't have these surveys already in place, maybe that's a good way to start. So start listening instead of waiting people to come to you when they have a problem. Ask them. How are you doing? What can we do? How are we doing things? How is this company supporting you? What would you like? Because also, well-being programs and leadership programs and burnout programs, I think they're not cookie cutter. There's a lot that we can do. So it goes a long way when HR and management ask people what they want. And then again, parenthesis here, sometimes people don't know what they want if they've never been offered it before. So you have to be a little bit proactive, in showing people what your company can offer. And this is what I see a lot. So especially with companies more traditional, let's say spaces like banking, where in Greece or in general, it's not really, an industry where you would see a lot of, care. Let's just say they're more traditional cultures, more rigid in that sense. And I see that when such programs and such initiatives are offered, they are so well received, and they come back and they offer so much because people feel that they're being taken care of. And I hear it again and again and again. It's like, well, for the first time, the company has cared for me as an individual. And this is so refreshing. And we should do that often, and we should do it again and again and again. So that, again, reflects itself on engagement, for example, or satisfaction. So it could be both ways. If these numbers are falling, dive into those numbers. Why are they falling? Ask around, do a survey, run some focus groups. It doesn't have to cost much, but just get some feedback. How are your people feeling? Because sometimes, especially when psychological safety is not very high in a company, it's really hard to speak up. This is what I had experienced a lot. I didn't feel it was okay to share that I wasn't okay, because I thought that everyone was faring great, better than me, and I was sort of falling behind. And, it kind of made me want to grind my teeth even more and hang in there more and, push myself even harder, and never mention that I was struggling, because I couldn't hear anybody else struggling. There wasn't any space for that 24 years ago when I was working in New York. There was no space for that in consulting. Now there is. I mean, a lot of my clients are in management consulting. I have some of the biggest consultancies, a big four that I'm working with. There's a big shift towards that. We're listening more.
And we need to, don't we? But I think you made a great point there about psychological safety, because I was speaking to a client last week, and this is a one-to-one client that I've been working with on and off now for a few years. We started working with burnout specifically. We've gone on to do some other bits and pieces. They've then gone into a kind of a new role, but same organization, and almost kind of back to square one in terms of the situation. The organization is not helping at all. But I had a conversation with them last week, and they've got the opportunity. So there has recently just been an internal pulse survey that's been done, and it's like this particular level within the organization have pretty much all reported the same things, right? Not being supported, not being heard, not feeling like they can voice things. So there's this kind of issue. So the CEO has then arranged to meet with this particular group of people tomorrow. As we were having the conversation, I was having this conversation with my client, and what they were saying was they do not feel that tomorrow's conversation is going to be a safe space. And we talked that through a lot, because actually this could be your one and only opportunity to actually be heard. But they were talking about the level of fear that is being felt across this whole level, because actually if we do speak up, could things be more difficult? Is this an opportunity, if we speak up, for them to get rid of us? Is this? And we literally spoke about, right, if like, how are you going to feel on Wednesday morning, right? Let's fast forward to Wednesday morning. If you have stayed quiet and not voiced everything, how are you going to feel when you wake up on Wednesday morning? But if you know that you've voiced it and said what needs to be said, how are you going to feel on Wednesday morning? And that's kind of how we rephrased it. And they're now like, I know that I have to do something about it, right? Whatever the outcome, I know that I have to do it. But psychological safety does play a big part in this, doesn't it? Whether it is surveys or one-to-one conversations or meetings or any of that stuff, right? Psychological safety is, and because there are so many people that are living in fear, and it's impacting well-being, it's impacting mental health, it's contributing to burnout. But again, I think for all of us, somebody has to be the first one to go. right? Somebody has to be the first one to speak up. Somebody has to be the first one to try. And as difficult as that is for people, because it might result in job loss, it might result in challenges, it might result in all of those things, and it might not. It actually might result in change, and it might result in things being different, and it could result in a whole host of things. Are you still finding that, again, with some of the organizations that you work for? Is there like a collective view of what of creating that psychological safety, or are you still coming across some of that fear and worry and concern about voicing some of these things? Because actually, what if I do say something and the outcome is not great?
I see both, to be honest, and it depends on the culture of the company. I see both. With some companies, we're really far away from that. And there's a lot that we need to do about psychological safety. And then there's some others that actually embrace it. I mean, we're running some trainings actually about psychological safety and mental health in the workspace, where we're creating awareness about mental health issues and also empowering, especially people managers and leaders, into how to recognize these mental health issues in the workplace and then manage them in a more effective way. And what we see when we first start to implement these trainings is that managers are so thirsty for these trainings. The reason being, they have already experienced mental health issues in their team because they're there. 1 in 4 people is suffering right now from a mental health issue worldwide, and 1 in 2 people will suffer from one in the span of their life. So chances are you will have people in your team that have had or are having a mental health issue. So as a leader, as a manager, you've already dealt with that, but we're never empowered or supported enough from the organization how to do it better. So when we start rolling out these kinds of trainings, we see such a great, let's say, response from people, because they feel like they're heard. They feel like they're supported. It's a part of my job that nobody took care of before. It's there. It's making my job very hard. It's uncomfortable. It's icky. I mean, I don't know how to deal with it. It's there. And for the first time, the company is caring for me and the person who is having a hard time. It is giving me tools, resources, and guidance on how to deal with it. And that is revolutionary. So we have both extremes. On one, there's companies that are really forward when it comes to that. They're going to step ahead, and they're not only acknowledging and destigmatizing, but they're also going into empowerment. And then there's companies that are still sort of in their infancy, in their steps, when they're starting to talk about emotional, psychological safety and trust, and then opening up the door for awareness. So I'm sure that you probably see the same thing. There's both ends of the spectrum out there.
Totally. And everything in between, right? Everything in between.
Yeah.
Perfect. So we said we were only going to chat for half an hour.
Yeah.
And we've done our half an hour. So what would, and we could keep going all week with this stuff, right? This is just the beginning. You may see the two of us back together regularly at some point in the future. But I suppose to kind of close today, what would you want to leave people with today? So I suppose particularly as we are, like, we're getting into, particularly with kind of where we're both living and a lot of the kind of place that we're working, right? We're getting into that kind of cold, dark time of year. Mental health challenges, well-being can start to suffer a bit more anyway, for lots and lots of different reasons. What would you want to kind of be a final thought, a final consideration for leaders? Let's kind of frame it from the view of leaders and what they could be doing to be more proactive in the well-being of their people.
I love that question. So basically, it would be asking more questions. So asking and genuinely caring, how are you? And then waiting for an answer. And then if you get just, I'm okay, ask again, ask twice, ask 3 times. No, how are you really? I mean, I care. So one is asking and then waiting for a reply that is genuine. Keep asking, even if you're not getting a reply, because sometimes people that are struggling do not want to share because they feel, again, that there's no trust, there's no safety. So if you keep asking, you're opening the door constantly. I'm constantly opening the door for trust to happen. And then also show vulnerability and model that behavior that you want to see in your team. Model openness. Share when you're struggling. Be human and care for your people. So you need to know how each and every one of your people, your direct reports, is behaviorally, mentally, physically when they're okay. So when they're not okay, you can notice a difference. Yeah. So what does that mean? You have to really get to know them. You have to spend time to know them on a personal level so that then you can spot the signs. And when they tell you, oh, I'm okay, but you know they're not okay, then you can persist, and then you can put on a one-on-one, and then you can take them for a coffee, and then you can sit down with them and like, this is not who I remember you to be. There's something here. How can I help?
Yeah. I love that. And I specifically love what you said, right? Ask and genuinely care, right? That's the bit. Because again, I think a lot of leaders are struggling. A lot of leaders are under pressure. A lot of leaders are themselves, right, struggling with well-being. They're on the brink of burnout. They're dealing with high stress. They're dealing with all of that. But I think the key, right, it's not, again, this isn't about tick box exercises, is it? It's not about just, well, I've asked how you are, how are you? Box ticks off, on we move to the next
one.
On
the training, they told me to ask. Yeah, I asked.
Exactly, yeah. I was told I need to ask how you are. So how are you? Off we go, box ticked, move on to the next person. It's not like literally, as we, as you said, they're like, keep repeating. How are you? But genuinely mean it, right? Like how are you? How are you feeling? How are you coping? What are you struggling with? Where can we go? And I do think, and again, I'm sure we'll be on the same page with this one. But I think I see a lot from managers and leaders where we see the people stuff as being the extra, right? It's like, this is the job and all of the people stuff is the add-on. And actually, as a manager or leader of people, the people are your job. And actually everything else becomes the add-on. So I think if you've got it the wrong way round, this is where we're struggling to create psychologically safe, happy, healthy, well places to work, where we can all be well-beings in the workplace, right? Where we can be proactive, where we can banish burnout, where we can say all of that sort of stuff. And I think that's where we've got a lot of it the wrong way round, right? We're focusing too much on the job and not enough about the people. But actually, as a manager or a leader, your role is the people, and everything else is what needs to come second. And I think from I'll leave that as kind of my final thought for today. In that, like, that's how we need to take it. And both of us on this call have been, I think, on the other end of that. And as we said, we're both living with the consequences, right? 14 years and 11 years after burnout, and we're both still dealing with the consequences, right? This is why we are so passionate about the proactiveness and the prevention and all of that sort of stuff, right? We're not just talking about this stuff to tick boxes. We are talking about this stuff because we are living with the consequences.
Exactly.
And it's not nice. It's not nice. So there we go. We'll leave it there. But I hope that's been helpful for everybody. Do let us know. Do give us comments. Do whatever. We may come back and do this again because we've both got lots and lots to talk about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it'll be amazing. But for now, everybody, we will say goodbye. It's been a pleasure sharing this space with you all and having this conversation. So yeah, enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. We'll speak soon.
Yes. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.